the shock that shook your faith. Chosen one, let me speak to you slowly here. Because what you went through was not small. Divorce does something to the soul that few people truly understand. It is not just the ending of a relationship. It feels like the collapse of a future you already lived in your mind. One day, you were building a life with someone. The next day, you were standing in the silence, wondering how everything you prayed for could fall apart so completely. I know the shock didn't just hit your emotions, it hit your faith. You prayed, you tried, you believed God would fix it. And when it still ended, something inside you whispered questions you were afraid to say out loud. Did I hear God wrong? Did I fail him? Did he turn his back on me? Those questions didn't make you weak. They made you human. And they certainly did not disqualify you from being chosen. Chosen ones often experience deeper pain because they love deeply, commit fully, and believe sincerely. You didn't enter that marriage halfway. You gave your heart, your loyalty, your prayers, and your future. So when it ended, it felt like something was ripped out of you. Not just a person, but a version of yourself. The version that believed love would last forever the way you imagined it. There were nights when you lay awake replaying conversations, decisions, and moments. You asked yourself what you could have done differently. You blamed yourself for things that were never yours to carry. You wondered why God allowed betrayal, distance, coldness, or silence to grow where love once lived. And the hardest part was smiling in front of people who had no idea how broken you felt inside. What hurt the most wasn't even the arguments or the separation. It was the feeling of spiritual confusion. You expected God to intervene the way you imagined. You expected a miracle that would restore what was falling apart. And when that miracle didn't come, it felt like God went quiet. That silence shook you. Because chosen ones are used to hearing God, feeling him, being guided. And suddenly, it felt like you were walking in fog. But listen to me closely now. God's silence does not mean his absence. Sometimes, when God is doing his deepest work, he speaks the least. Not because he doesn't care, but because the lesson cannot be taught with words. It can only be learned through experience. Your divorce made you question your worth, your discernment, and even your calling. You may have thought, if I'm really chosen, why would God allow this kind of pain? But chosen one, being chosen does not mean being spared. It means being prepared. And preparation often looks like loss before clarity. You were not crazy for believing the marriage could work. You were not foolish for loving deeply. And you were not wrong for praying for restoration. Those prayers were heard. But sometimes, God answers by removing what prayer alone cannot heal. The shock you felt was the breaking of an illusion, not the breaking of your destiny. What shattered was a structure that could not support where God was taking you next. And the reason it hurt so badly is because part of you was still trying to survive in a place God was already calling you out of. You didn't just lose a partner, you lost routine, identity, safety, and certainty. You lost the version of life you thought you were supposed to have, and grief came in waves. Some days you felt strong. Other days, one song, one memory, one quiet moment could bring tears out of nowhere. That didn't mean you were going backward. It meant you were processing. Chosen one, let me tell you something that will bring peace to your spirit. God is not disappointed in you. He is not shaking his head at your pain. He is not punishing you. What you experienced was not rejection. It was redirection. But redirection always feels like loss before it feels like purpose. The enemy wants you to believe that divorce disqualified you. Society wants you to believe you failed. Even religion sometimes whispers shame instead of grace. But God does not see you the way people see you. He sees the heart. He sees the endurance. He sees the lessons you learned. And he sees the strength that was forged in the fire you didn't ask for. Your faith shaking did not mean it was gone. It meant it was being refined. A faith that has never been tested is fragile, but a faith that survives heartbreak becomes unshakable. You may not have realized it yet, But something inside you grew stronger during those darkest moments. You became more discerning, more self-aware, more connected to truth instead of illusion. You are still chosen, even after the papers were signed, even after the house became quiet, even after the dreams changed shape. God did not change his mind about you. He simply changed your direction. And in the next part, I'm going to help you understand something powerful. God did not leave you in that season. He removed something that could not go with you into what he is preparing next. Let me add something important here. Chosen one, because this is where many of you quietly get stuck. After the shock settled, after the initial tears slowed down, you were left with a strange emptiness. Not loud pain anymore, but a hollow feeling. A sense that something was missing, yet you couldn't even explain what it was. That emptiness wasn't weakness. It was space. Space God was creating inside you. You see, before the divorce, your life was filled with noise, expectations, compromises, emotional labor, trying to hold things together, trying to be strong for someone else while slowly shrinking yourself. And when it all ended, the silence felt unbearable. But that silence was not meant to punish you. It was meant to introduce you back to yourself. Many chosen ones confuse familiarity with destiny. Just because something feels known does not mean it is aligned. That marriage may have been familiar. It may have been comfortable at one time. But comfort can quietly become a cage. And God will never allow his chosen to remain trapped, even if the cage is decorated with good memories. You also felt judged by family, by friends, by people who didn't know what was happening behind closed doors. Some of them spoke words that cut deep. Others stayed silent when you needed support the most. That isolation made the pain heavier. But hear me clearly. God often isolates his chosen not because they are rejected, but because he is separating them from voices that cannot guide them through the next season. There were moments you questioned your discernment. You asked yourself how you didn't see the signs earlier. You replayed red flags and ignored warnings, and that self-criticism became another burden. But chosen one, discernment grows through experience. Wisdom is not born in comfort, it is born in consequence. You didn't fail discernment. Discernment was being trained, and here is a truth that may be hard to hear, but it will heal you. Sometimes God allows us to choose what is not aligned so we can finally understand what alignment feels like. If everything had worked perfectly, you might have never developed the spiritual maturity you carry now. You would have remained dependent on the relationship instead of grounded in God. The pain slowed you down. It forced you to sit with yourself. It forced you to pray differently. Not desperate prayers anymore, but honest ones. The kind where you stopped pretending and started surrendering. That shift alone tells me God is still deeply involved in your life. So if you are wondering why this had to hurt so much, the answer is simple. Because you are built for depth. Shallow lessons would never transform you. And what broke you emotionally is what strengthened you spiritually. God did not leave. He removed. Chosen one, this is where your understanding must shift. Because if you misinterpret this part, you will carry unnecessary pain for years. God did not leave you in that season. He removed something. And there is a difference so deep that once you see it, peace begins to settle into places that have been restless for far too long. When the marriage ended, it felt like abandonment. It felt like God stepped back and let everything collapse. But God never abandons his chosen. What he does, when necessary, is intervene quietly. He removes what cannot be healed, corrected, or carried forward. Not because he is cruel, but because he is precise. You were praying for peace. You were praying for clarity. You were praying for love to return, and God heard every single prayer. But sometimes the answer to those prayers is not restoration. Sometimes the answer is release. because you cannot have peace while staying connected to something that drains your spirit. You cannot gain clarity while remaining tied to confusion. And you cannot grow in love while constantly being wounded in the same place. There are relationships that God never intended to last forever, not because they were meaningless, but because they were instructional. Some people come into your life to awaken you, not to stay with you. And chosen ones often struggle with this truth because they are loyal by nature. You stay longer than you should. You try harder than required. You forgive more than is healthy, and you call endurance faith, even when God is calling you out. God saw what you could not fully see. He saw the emotional erosion. He saw the spiritual misalignment. He saw how much of yourself you were losing just to keep the relationship alive. He saw prayers turning into anxiety, love turning into survival, and joy turning into obligation. You may have been asking God to fix the other person, but God was watching what staying was doing to you. Let me say this clearly. Not everything that begins with prayer is sustained by God. You can pray your way into something that still isn't aligned with your destiny. God honors free will, even when it leads to lessons instead of lifetimes. And when a relationship starts interfering with your calling, your peace, or your spiritual clarity, God will step in. Not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. You may have felt God's hand when doors closed that you were still trying to keep open. Conversations ended that you wanted to continue, feelings changed that you prayed would stay the same, and that confusion hurt because it felt like betrayal. But chosen one, God does not betray. He protects, and protection does not always feel gentle. God removed the relationship because it could not go where He was taking you. Some people are assigned to your past, not your future, and if they cannot grow with you, they cannot walk with you. God will never elevate you while you are emotionally anchored to something that limits you. Elevation requires lightness, and that marriage had become too heavy for your spirit. You also need to understand this. God does not compete for space in your life. If something or someone begins to take His place in your heart, your decisions, or your identity, He will remove it, not to punish you, but to realign you. Because chosen ones are not meant to be dependent on human relationships for identity, validation, or purpose. You didn't lose God in your divorce. You lost an illusion. The illusion that love alone could sustain something God did not ordain for the long term. The illusion that effort could replace alignment. The illusion that sacrifice without growth was holy. God dismantled that illusion because it was blocking your vision. And yes, it hurt. Because removal always hurts more than walking away. You didn't choose the ending, it was forced. And forced endings bruise the ego and break the heart. But forced endings also save lives. They prevent deeper damage. They stop cycles that would have destroyed you slowly. God saw years ahead. He saw the bitterness that would have grown, the resentment that would have hardened your heart, the spiritual exhaustion that would have made you question everything. And because He loves you, He shortened the suffering. What you experienced was mercy disguised as loss. Chosen one, let this truth settle in your spirit. God did not leave you alone in the wreckage. He was the one guiding you out, even when you were too hurt to recognize His hand. And the moment you stop seeing the divorce as abandonment and start seeing it as divine removal, is the moment healing accelerates. Because God only removes what cannot be redeemed in its current form, and He only does that when something better, cleaner, and more aligned is ahead. And here is something else you must understand, chosen one, because this truth releases many of you from quiet self-blame. God often removes people in stages. First emotionally, then mentally, and finally physically. That is why, even before the divorce became official, you felt distant. Conversations felt forced. Affection faded. Prayer felt heavy instead of peaceful. That wasn't you failing. That was God slowly loosening a bond that could no longer hold spiritual weight. Many of you stayed longer than God wanted because you were hoping for the past to return. You were loyal to memories instead of truth. And God, in His patience, allowed time for you to see what you were truly dealing with. He allowed the mask to slip. He allowed patterns to repeat. He allowed exhaustion to surface, not to hurt you, but to confirm what your spirit already knew, but your heart wasn't ready to accept. God will never rush his chosen into separation without confirmation. He confirms through peace leaving, through joy fading, through prayers feeling unanswered, through your body carrying stress your soul can no longer hide. When your spirit begins to resist what your mind is still justifying, that is divine warning. And many of you ignored that warning out of love, fear, or obligation. You were trying to be Christ-like by enduring, but endurance is only holy when it produces fruit. If endurance only produces pain, anxiety, and self-abandonment, it is no longer obedience. It becomes disconnection from self. And God will never ask you to disappear in order to please him. Another reason God removed the relationship is because chosen ones attract people who are drawn to their light, but not committed to their growth. They benefit from your compassion, your patience, your prayers, your stability, but they do not pour back at the same level. Over time, this imbalance drains you, and what drains you weakens your calling. God protects his investment, and you are his investment. You may have noticed that after the divorce, even though you were grieving, a strange sense of relief surfaced at unexpected moments. Guilt followed that relief quickly. You told yourself you shouldn't feel lighter. But that lightness was not disrespect. It was alignment returning. It was your spirit no longer fighting itself. God removes relationships when they require you to constantly explain your worth, justify your needs, or minimize your calling. You were never meant to beg for basic respect or emotional safety. And the fact that you survived that season without losing your faith completely is proof that God was holding you the entire time.